everyone, this is Paul Casey, the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series, where we get together and we talk about Kenpo principles, discussions of forms, techniques, and related. And a lot of times we're lucky to have special guests. And tonight we are very honored because we have 3 Hall of Fame members. And the beauty of it is that all 3 of these gentlemen spent quality time with the founding Grandmaster, Ed Parker. So tonight, our focus is going to be lessons with Ed Parker, and it's influenced by Mr. Lee Wedlake's book, who wrote on that subject, which I have here. You can get a copy of this, pick it up, and if you see Lee, you can ask him, and maybe he'll sign it for you, or not. It depends on him. It's outside of my scope, guys. I get into that. So anyway, Lee lays it out from the first time he met him in November of 1979 to his last conversations with Mr. Parker during a seminar in November of 1990. And then Mr. Parker passed on December the 15th. Let's pick it up from December the 16th. We just learned about Ed Parker passing. I'm going to introduce my friends here, and they're your friends as well. We're very honored to have with us tonight. We have Grandmaster from the IKCA, Chuck Sullivan. Hello, Chuck.
Are you seeing me? Because I'm barely seeing you.
I can see. Can you see, sir?
Big blue circle here, and you're very, very dim, but you're still there. Oh. I'm fine. As long as we're communicating, we're good.
That's all that matters, right?
Right.
Okay, with us as well, we have Senior Master of the Arts, Dennis Conatser. Hello, Dennis.
Greetings, greetings. Hi, everybody.
And finally, our true author and one of the scholars of Kenpo Karate, really a fine gentleman, and he is just a wonderful person. Give a warm welcome to Senior Master of the Arts, Lee Wedlake. Hello, Lee.
Hey, greetings from the Republic of Texas.
The beautiful state of Texas. We love Texas. The eyes of Texas are upon you.
That's right.
All right. So let's start with you, Lee. Talk about December 16th, 1990. What happened on that day?
Well, in a state of shock, as I wrote in the book and some of the articles that I've written, Edmund had called me, and it was one of those early morning phone calls that you dread. I've gotten enough of those in my life. And he had said, I'm calling my father's friends to let them know that he'd passed away. So understandably, it's a state of shock. And it's not something you want to hear, of course, but it's the days afterwards where you just feel such a sense of loss for so many reasons, because he was like a father, he was like a brother, he was a teacher, a mentor. Great guy, just, to hang out with. And I wrote one of the subsequent articles in Black Belt magazine about him and his legacy. And I sat at my typewriter. I don't know if I was using a typewriter or a word processor back then, but I cried. I mean, what could I do? I cried. It was just such an emptiness without him. And I think about him every day because he had such an impact on my life.
Dennis, what were your thoughts when you heard on December 16th what happened?
Well, I likely had an early morning phone calls, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, and my wife's going, "Who in the heck's calling you at this time of the morning?" And of course, I didn't know, and answered, and then of course, you get this feeling that just comes over the back of your head, and just all of a sudden, instant grief. I'm going, no. This can't be happening. So a huge sigh and a huge depression feeling, went on, and I go, oh no, this is too many years too early. And so it was much like what Lee said, same feeling. And I got up, called the airlines, and immediately flew out to California. It was disbelief and just I think I'm still in a dream. Just nothing joyful whatsoever. It was incredible sadness.
Chuck, December 16th, you had actually seen Mr. Parker the week that week when he passed. Am I right?
Yeah, we were together Thursday night at the West LA school, and we were the last two to leave, and we had a pretty deep conversation at that time. And I believe it was Jeff Speakman that drove him to the airport to go to Hawaii. And it was Jeff that called me the next morning, again, very, very early, and told me that the old man had had a heart attack in the Honolulu airport, and he was gone. And I've taken, in the business I was in, I had a very successful business as a barber. That's what I did for 40 years. And Kenpo was always my love, but I made my livelihood cutting hair. And I didn't mess around with that. I mean, my business was my business. I took exactly 2 days off in the 40 years that I wasn't sick. One was my daughter's wedding, and she said, "You better be there," because I was seriously considering just going to the reception, and she said, "Oh no, Daddy." And anyhow, the other was for the old man's funeral. And in 40 years, those are the only 2 days that in fact, I think the only 2 other days I took off was when I couldn't make it because I was too sick to get out of bed. But other than that, in the 40 years that I cut hair, I had really put like 4 days off for, when I should have been there. But again, as Lee said, and Dennis, it was unbelievable. Ed Parker and I were born the same year, 1931. He in March and me in November. So we're like, many months apart, but for a period there, we're the same age. Every year we're the same age. When I met him, he was 27 and I was 27. It was February. He was going to be 28 in March. And I had just turned 27 in November. So we're the same age. And I couldn't believe it because Ed had such a fatherly image to all of us. I mean, here we are, literally just the same age, and yet I looked upon him as not a father figure, obviously, but he was just so far beyond everything. And of course, when I began the art, he was the only black belt in the United States because Hawaii was not yet a state. So he was the only one. And he knew everything about karate and a whole lot more, it seemed. It was always hard for me to realize that we were contemporaries much more than he being the mentor. Although in the art, obviously, he was head and shoulders above everybody, and he was a thinking man. He did an awful lot of thinking, and it shows in everything he did.
In 1990, after I saw him at the Internationals, and he asked me to come by to eat with him, I went to Japan. I was there for almost 4 months. I was on tour, and I still have something from that tour, which is behind me. I got this when I was in Kyoto. It's a beautiful samurai print. They do that by hand there, and I've kept that ever since 1990. And I think there's a 9-hour, 10-hour difference. Not exactly sure, but it doesn't matter. And I'm in Japan, and all of a sudden there's a phone call, and it's my father. And my father was telling me, he says, "Paul, Frank called you very early. I think you should call him." So immediately I picked up the phone and I called him, and that's how I learned of Mr. Parker's passing. The impact is incredible when you think about it, because we talk about him every day. I can still see him in my mind. I mean, when they had the dinner for him, the 85th birthday party in Costa Mesa, I actually saw his presence there. That's how bigger than life he was. He had an aura. I saw this figure coming in with the light hair, and I could see him, and I thought, no, that am I hallucinating? But no, he was such a spiritual individual. His presence was there because he wanted to be there with us. So, what was the last thing he said to you, Chuck, before he passed away? You remember?
Yeah, I do. Because it. All right, listen. This.
Sharing it that.
Well, no. This isn't for public consumption, but between us. I think part of what killed Ed Parker was the knowledge of something I'm going to impart with you right now and share with you. We're the last two in the dressing room. Everybody else is gone. And he dropped a bomb on me. He said, "Chuck, I don't know what to do." And I'm like, "Well, what? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, I go out on these promotions and I sit on the board and I watch. And the only thing I recognize is the names of the techniques." Wow. I was literally speechless. I almost blurted out, "Well, you got to start over again." Yeah, this is 2 days before the man died. And I caught myself in time. I mean, there was no starting over. Unfortunately for Ed Parker, everything went too fast. And he admitted that later on to Tom Bleecker. Tom asked him, if you could change anything, what would it be? He said, "I would have slowed everything down." But he couldn't. He couldn't. Once the cat was out of the bag, once the word karate had become known in the English language, it was already too late. He propelled that, but it was too late. He couldn't do anything about it. And he didn't have the one thing that we have, and that's video. We have seen every one of our 600 and some odd black belts ourselves, and we're the only ones that can promote the black belt. Everybody else under us can promote the brown belt. They have to submit it to headquarters for black belt. So we get to see everybody. Therefore, we get to keep everybody doing our system. His system had changed to the point where literally he didn't recognize it. And there was no way to correct it.
Dennis, what was your last thoughts? When was the last thing Mr. Parker said to you?
We were in Vegas over there on a seminar and some business, and he brought me. We were done, and he said, "Hey, come up the room." So I came up the room, and he was talking to me about a technique that he was working on, or not that he was working on, but that he was reinvestigating. And he said, look what I found here. And he went over these moves, and he goes, "Look at the reverse motion that's going on here." So he was all tickled about going over this move. And he said, "We've done this for years, and I just got a little bit of an epiphany on this move." And so we had talked basically about that. And he was getting ready to leave to fly back to Pasadena. So we kind of ended the trip there, and everything was great. It was good. We were setting up a black belt test for one of my guys. I said, when you get some time and you get back from Oahu, he had a premonition that his mother was going to die, and he had to go see her. So he got all his stuff in order. He said he organized went through his office and reorganized his office, and went through all his policies and things like that, and updated them and everything. It was almost like he had an intuition something was going to happen. But what he told me was he didn't feel his mother was not going to make it. Well, she obviously did. It was not her, but it was him that was the subject of the premonition, obviously. And so it was shocking, but we had kind of talked about that, and basically laying out, more basically plans for after the first year in 91. I met him in 72, and saw him sporadically, through seminars. I brought him out to to Arizona to my studio and had some interesting conversations and such there with him. He straightened me out about the universal pattern placement, things like that. So I had it hang on the wall wrong. And so I immediately corrected that. And but it was just I don't know. I feel the same way as I think pretty much everybody does. Anybody that was any way serious with the art, we think about him every day. We can't not think about him, and that's without tournaments or anything else. I mean, just in daily life, something comes up. He crosses my mind over something he said, something he taught. Some factor of Kenpo just enters your life. It really is a lifestyle when you take it to this level. And so, greatly miss him. I don't think you think it's going to be, it's almost 31 years this year. And honestly, it almost seems like, to me, he's just off on a seminar. I haven't talked to him in a while. He's off, someplace doing something, and then I'll wait till he returns so I can talk to him. So that's kind of how it is with me. So he's never left me, other than the physicalness of being there. I miss all our times at the house and everywhere, for that matter. So
Lee, your thoughts. What was the last thing you discussed with Ed Parker?
Well, as I wrote in the book, it was about almost a month from the time that he passed. He had been out to see me in Chicago and do his last seminar there, and he had promoted me to 6th at that time. So we discussed a number of things, but it was one of the things that was significant, I thought, was that when we were sitting at dinner, he sat back and he had this very strange look on his face, and he kind of shuddered a little bit with his eyes closed. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he just went, "I'll be all right." And we looked at him. There were myself and a couple of the other black belts there. He says, "Yeah, I'm good." Okay. So I was concerned about this, and I didn't know that he'd had that his problems had progressed that much. He and I had discussed it, health problems over time, and so as far as the last things that he said to me were at wrapping up that seminar and putting him back on a plane, and, "Hey, I'll talk to you soon, see you later," and probably talk to him about a week or two afterwards at the house. But as far as anything, the very last things he said to me, I really can't remember.
That's all right. I envy you three gentlemen because you had a very close personal relationship with Ed Parker. I was sort of like the kid that went to the candy store and looked in and watched all you guys in there and like, whoa, I get to see that. And, Frank was very quiet about that. He didn't, he wasn't one to step in and take over. He just sit there and watch, and he just let his ability on the mat. And that's what his great influence. And I learned a lot from him. What was the lesson? What was some of the best lessons that you can remember, Lee, that stand out in your mind when you think of Mr. Parker in a positive way?
Boy, there's a whole list of them. But as I've mentioned before in previous interviews, he was a master at working with people on a number of levels. And having come from royal blood, and he would have been a prince had the royal family continued, he would treat people like that. And he had that sense about him that affected people. They knew this. He just, as soon as you walked in the room, I remember being at a tournament in Ohio, and there was some sort of a meeting going on. Several high-level black belts were in this room together, and it was like, Ed Parker's upstairs, Ed Parker's upstairs. When I got up to in this hallway, there's all these black belts plastered up against the walls. And they're, like, what are they talking about? What's going on? Well, the meeting was over and the door opened, and Ed Parker came out of that room, and everybody flattened up against the walls. I said, "This is crazy." Whoa. It had to be about 1977, 1978, but shortly after the very first time I'd met him. but he had that impact. I mean, he didn't have to say anything. And I remember Jack Farr was in the meeting with him. And Jack had told me, well, they're talking about maybe making this karate circuit or something like that. And Jack didn't like the idea. And he told Mr. Parker that. And as Jack told me, he said, it's like buying a car. He said, I don't know about this. And he said, Ed Parker put his arm around my shoulders and said, what if your dad said it was a good car? That's a very much an Ed Parker sort of thing.
Yeah.
Dennis, you were with him many times. Tell us how he would control the attendees in a seminar or an audience that wanted to learn something from Ed Parker.
Well, there was very little of him controlling anything. He walked in the room and everybody was just jumping on every word that he said. In some cases, too much so. But it was like the president walked in the room. Everybody, minded their P's and Q's, with the exception of very few, of which somebody kicked them in the rear if they were messing up and not paying attention or creating a disturbance, and straightened them out. So it was really interesting. He exuded such authority and such power. When he walked in the room brightened. And it just illuminated. With knowledge, with execution. Everybody hung on every word. Everybody really paid attention, and that was pretty much everywhere we went with him. Lee and I had the good fortune of going to England and Jersey with him, and even Australia, New Zealand down there. So everywhere he went, it was Ed Parker was a phenom, just a very very interesting, talkative, educated. There wasn't hardly a subject, very rarely, that you could speak on that he didn't have some knowledge on. And the thing is, if he wasn't knowledgeable, he wanted to hear about it, and he wanted to interrogate you, on something if it was something he didn't know about. My greatest lesson with him, or remembrance, a thing that really have stuck with me years and years. We were in Pasadena going to pick up something at the pharmacy, and we were on the way out the checkout stand. And there's all the impulse items around the checkout stand there, and there happened to be a little bin of little army vehicles, little miniatures. They were like Matchbox type stuff. And I believe he picked up this tank, and he looked at this, and he just marveled at it. He goes, "Look at this." And I go, "Yeah, okay, it's a little tank. Yeah, cool. I used to like those tanks when I was a kid." And he goes, "No. Look at the detail. Look at the detail in this thing for this little, dollar item. How much detail is in here?" And that was this thing was, be specific. Look at the detail. Think about it. Look at how it was designed, what its purpose was, what its usefulness was, what its detriments were, what its, basically just incredible analyzation. And that kind of stuck with me forever. And I pass that on to my kids. So much so to my youngest son, Stephen, where he pulls that on me now. He'll say something and I go, "No, Dad, that's not being specific enough." I'm going, "Oh, come on. You know what I'm talking about." Yeah.
Well, the beautiful thing is that both of you gentlemen, Lee and Dennis, were involved with Ed Parker the last 12 years of his life, where he was already established in the martial arts community. He already earned that respect through years of training and teaching, and then the seminars, and then obviously demonstrations, and then the tournaments, and then the celebrities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, we go to Chuck in the beginning when nobody knew who he was and they didn't understand what karate is. How was it back in the early days when Mr. Parker and you were in front of a group of people trying to convince them that you weren't a Mexican restaurant?
Well, first of all, everything you guys have said is true, absolutely true. But it was a process, and you got to see him at his finest. I got to see him at his beginnings. And when in 1959, I was only in the art for like 3 months. And he was going to do a demonstration at a high school at Southgate High. They had taken over the park, the big building at the park, and they were going to keep the kids there all night long. It's going to be an overnight party for all the grads. And it wasn't a prom or anything, but it was, and they had demonstrations and they had people coming in and showing stuff, and they had all kinds of things lined up. And they invited Ed, and he invited us. So here I am, like a 3-month student, and again, Ed knew everything. We knew nothing. Well, they put us off, and they put us off, and they put us off until it's getting to be like around midnight, and they're going to go all night. So it doesn't make any difference to them. But Ed finally said he's ready to walk out. And they finally said, oh, no, you go on now. Well, he went out there and he broke some boards and he laid out a half a dozen people, and then he just walked out. He didn't say word one. Well, first of all, I was so pissed off by that time that, he was seething, and he didn't want to let people know that. But Ed really, in the beginning, his demonstrations were mostly physical. He talked very little. Now, later on, if Ed Parker could have, I believe he would have had a little sideline in stand-up comedy. He loved to make people laugh, and his demonstrations became at least as entertaining as they were informative. And he had gags going throughout him, the whole thing. He loved to hear people laugh. I got a good one for him. He was in Ireland, and all the people, of course, are 120% respect and so on and so forth. And this kid comes over and he says, "Hey, Eddie, I got a joke for you." And the elders went,
Okay.
He called him Eddie. Oh, Jesus, we'll kill him. We'll kill him. And as so the kid tells him a joke, and he says, "Well, I got one for you." And he says, for the rest of the day, the kid and they were telling jokes, and these other guys standing around twiddling their thumbs. He loved. I remember a joke one time. I don't remember the joke, thank God, because it wasn't a good joke, and I laughed out of politeness. And he insisted that I tell him the joke, and it was a terrible joke. But I had to tell it to him, and he laughed too out of politeness. That was about it. The man loved to entertain. Sure. He really did. But that was he learned that. He wasn't born with it, put it that way. Well, maybe he was, but it just took a long time to develop. So when you guys knew him, he had it already. He was already there. And when you say, when he walked in the room, everybody knew that Ed Parker was there. He went to the party here one night, and I remember somebody saying to him, "Who is that?" I said, "Ed Parker." Who is he? I said, "You don't know who he is?" The person had no idea. I don't know or anything. And I said, "Well, he's our guy," and so on. And it's like, God, I thought he was a movie star or something. That's the presence he had. He's just, when he entered a room, he took it over.
No, he would also discuss things that had nothing to do with karate.
Oh, absolutely.
And he loved that.
Yeah.
And I remember he was telling me, he says, "Paul, when you travel and you have a lot of cash, you don't have to declare it. Just stick it in your billfold. And when you're checking through that, this is back in the 70s, I think, when he was saying that. He said, "Oh, just take your wallet and put it down there." And I think, "Oh, you got your wallet." "Oh, yeah." Picked up his wallet. "Oh, yeah, like $10,000 in there or something." "Oh, yeah." Because you had a declaring thing over that. I thought, wow. I said, "Yeah, I don't expect them to give me $10,000. I think they're going to put it in my bank account instead." But, I understand why he did it. Dennis, give us a humorous story of the side of Mr. Parker.
Oh, well, I think the most kind of embarrassing story was we were coming through Heathrow, and I had at that time the big VHS cameras. There was a camera with a VHS tape that was actually inside the camera, and I had a big heavy tripod, a very good tripod, everything. And I'm coming through with my luggage, and they they go, I don't know, they were pulling us off, and pulled me off on the side and was going through it. And he said, "What's in here?" And I go, I don't know, drugs. And I said some ridiculous thing, and then they really pulled me off on the side. And Mr. Parker was, yeah, I was kidding, but obviously they were not, and they pulled me off and went through every part of the suitcase. Well, Mr. Parker's over on the side going, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, they're going through all my luggage." He goes, "Why? What'd you say?" And I said, "Well, I was kidding them," and I said, I was bringing in drugs or something," and and oh, he was mad, because he had a time schedule, and that irritated him because now he had to sit around and wait for them to go through my stuff, and so they finally got through with it. He cleared me and went through, and I told the guys, "Look, I was just kidding," and they go, "Well," and this is back then before any of the modern day stuff was going on, but even back then they're going through it, and I finally reunited with everybody, and he goes, "Look, you do that again, I'm going to leave you."
Do you still have memories of your last trip with him then? Think twice.
Dennis, I would have left you.
I know. I think everybody was mad. Skip and
Oh,
Lee were there. I don't know what Skip
tell me-
I'll tell you what he said.
Lee,
So you're on your own,
on that
pal.
trip. Were you on the trip with him on that one?
I was. I was.
You
I was
choke him out?
well, it was a year later that Skip Hancock brought a samurai sword through security in New Zealand.
Yeah, we were characters.
I can't blame him for that. I did the same thing coming back from Japan. Master Long actually gave me one, a ceremonial, and the samurai sword in Japan is very important to them. It represents their country. And when I went through customs to leave, and I had to declare this, and they said, "You can't take this with you. It ain't going with you," basically. And I said, "Hold on. Master Long gave this to me," and they said, "Who?" And I said who it was, and they called him. I mean, this guy is he's like Ed Parker in Japan. And he's knighted by the Queen. He's an amazing man. And they had this dialogue for a few minutes, and then they came back. "Okay, you can take it with you," because he had my name engraved on it and everything. He said, "But it has to go in the cockpit with the pilot." Like, I'm going to be able to get this damn thing out and run down the aisle. Going back, I said, "I don't care. Let him have it, whatever." And so the pilot comes out. He says, "Are you the guy that owns this?" I said, "Yes." He said, "How the hell did you get this?" And then I had to tell him that same story, which I told customs. He says, "That's impressive." I didn't think anything of it. I really didn't. I just thought, yeah, I didn't know. So kudos to Skip. So Lee, give us some funny story that's better than all these ones. There's got to be something there.
Oh boy. Nothing's coming to mind right now. I know that we used to sit in the car and tell jokes back and forth too. And you get the regional variations on it. He was always saying, "Well, I like mine better."
Changed it around, that's for sure. There was a few times. The only thing is when he was going up to, it's interesting how, and like that, he could change. He could be really upset about something, and then boom, he'd be happy. And we were in the car driving to Oxnard, and Frank was in the back seat with me, and Jim Mitchell was in the front with Mr. Parker. And I've never seen Frank so petrified of somebody driving a car. I mean, he was like, "Mr. Parker, please watch where you're going." Mr. Parker. And Parker's just like, guys, like this kind of stuff. And hey, Paul, you having a good, and oh my God. And I'm happy as a clam in the back. If I'm going with these guys. I'll be like in the Buddy Holly thing, the guy they don't know about in the back.
No, he took me for riding that Cadillac that Elvis had given him. We were going down to Garden Grove. He had some business to take care of. And I know what you're talking about with the driving, because he was like a madman. He says, Los Angeles, you got to make your own way.
Yeah. And he was fat. He go fast.
Oh yeah.
Figuring out how to, oh my God, it was, whatever. He was.
I called him Parnelli Parker.
Oh, really?
So he was like, like a race car driver, so it was like, he was, he had a stick shift, And, you know, he'd sit there and change gears and he'd kind of look over at me like, did you see that? Did you check those gear shifts out? And I'm going, yeah, I got it. Okay. You know,
Yeah.
he was hilarious. He really enjoyed the automobile.
Yeah. Once he got out of that element of whatever was antagonizing him, he's a very jovial man. He really was. And I like I said, when they shot the Inside Kung Fu cover, and Lee Thomas was the photographer. Did you ever meet him? You knew Lee Thomas, right? The photographer.
I don't think
His
so.
wife was a comedian. Shot all his stuff. Great guy. And I just remember he wasn't all that happy being in there to film, you know, do this, and it was over like 3 minutes. He went, "Grrr, grrr, grrr. Okay, we got it. Let's go." He said, "Let's go eat." And then he was happy, you know, and,
Oh, yeah.
and here's the thing. You guys, see, I never knew the names of the places. You know, Frank would take me here or there or whatever. And this, I just was in the back seat and I figured, well, we're going to eat somewhere. I'll find out what it is, you know? And that's when the real lessons came about in life. Am I right about that, Chuck?
You know, I must be an idiot because Ed Parker's driving never bothered me. I guess I was just so engrossed in the conversation. I didn't watch what he was doing. But what was the question?
But dining with Ed Parker.
I remember one time we went to this Chinese restaurant in Garden, not Garden. Anyhow, I'll think of Gardena. Beautiful place. It was great. I was so, I forgot the name of the place. Anyhow, if I'd go there again if I could. And we had this big dinner, and Ed piled up his plate with as much food as could fit on it. In fact, a little more because it was falling off the edges. I mean, it mounted. You know, I mean, he had this big place, and it mounted like that. And then we had this huge lazy Susan with all the dishes up there that we had taken our dinner from, and what was left in the dishes. Well, he started eating out of those until we were all about finished with our dinners, and then he started in on his plates. I never saw anybody do that before. Never seen anybody eat like that. I mean, like I say, we're at least halfway through our dinner, and as far as seconds were concerned, he already had the seconds. They were gone.
I
took us to
think
a
you
favorite restaurant.
arrived if you had the chance to dine with Ed Parker, to be honest with you. Now that I look back at it, I mean, the only thing is, you know, the guys that had experience like you three gentlemen with him, when the novice showed up, like me, the first times or so, I didn't know, you get to sit across from Mr. Parker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought, wow, really? He wants me to sit there? Oh, sure. And then Frank is like, oh, ha, ha, ha. He starts laughing that ha, 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 business. I said, what are you laughing about? He says, you watch. You watch. And you go
The joke
hungry.
was, you're going to eat the bones.
And the thing is, those two men knew where all the great places were. They all knew where all the great restaurants, where to go, and these little cubby holes and stuff like that. And I remember one time I was with the LVCVA, that's the Las Vegas Convention Visitor Authority. And I was with Mr. Loster. He was the senior executive for the convention. Great guy, funny man. He loved Jack Nicholson. He loved, what's his name? Don Rickles and Sinatra. He would know those. He knew all these guys. He got real close. And he was sort of a smart ass. And he said, Paul, I'm going to take you to the greatest restaurants in New York City. And we would go down these really disgusting alleys that you think you would find in a bad horror movie. You know, like, don't go down there. You're going to get jumped by 10,000 guys with knives, they're going to, whatever, that kind. And then you go down there and there's steam coming out and a low light. And I'm going, I say, man, I hope you know where you're going. You know, I said, you go first. Because if I have to run, I'm going the other way. And all of a sudden we get this little place and it's smelly. And you walk in there, it was just disgusting looking. And you go, geez, did they ever clean this place? You think in the health department, no wonder it's hidden. Nobody's going to go there. You know, we've got to survive eating there. And there was a line to get in. And he said, the best restaurants have the worst decor and they look like crap. But you know what? You're going to have a great time. And you know what? He was so right. Every time we went to New York City, we went there. And I'll never forget that. And I think that's how Trejo would do the same thing to me, except he didn't realize my palate hadn't adapted to his Mexican spices yet.
Yeah.
And we were working out. And it was in South Pasadena. This place, this corner. This serve, burgers and all kinds of junk. Mexican food. And if you were with Frank, he would grab those chilies, those big ass chilies. Do you know what I'm talking about, Lee? Did you ever eat those with him?
No.
I had never had one of those. I was really hungry, and he was taking them. Chuck, he was eating them like they were candy.
No.
He was sucking down the juice, Dennis. And I'm going, and I'm really hungry. I'm going, my God, this stuff must be pretty good. I said, is it really good? He goes, oh, it's the best. I love it, man. And I eat it all the time. You're going to love it. I said, okay. I said, let me have one. He goes, are you sure? And I had ordered a hamburger, a Coke, and some fries. I ate that chili, guys. I was spitting. I couldn't eat. I had destroyed my everything. And no matter what I did, I drank. I said, give me a shake. Give me more. I'm doing anything I can to stop this. It's like I swallowed kerosene, and he went.
You are gullible.
Me. It's horrible.
I got a picture I'd like to show you, Paul.
Don't worry. I had paid back on him later. I'll tell you a story privately one day on that.
Dennis may have been with us when we went with Ed Parker to the Golden Duck at Honolulu. Were you there, Dennis?
I was at the Golden Duck or the Golden Phoenix, his favorite restaurant.
Yeah, it was his favorite restaurant. I don't know if Golden Phoenix, Golden Duck.
Yeah.
But
Golden Dragon?
That was the last time. I think the last time it was going to be. It was going to be destroyed, and he was distraught about that.
He was, but he had ordered all that food. It came on the Big Lazy Susan, and the way that he described it later, he said, I had my black belts there with me. He says, I ordered the food, and says they didn't do anything. And then they attacked it. We didn't know what he had ordered, but it's like, wow, I'd never seen anything like that before. It was great. So I could see why he was distraught.
Well, his mom was there with us too.
Yes.
How was Mrs. Parker?
She was a little bit thing, and she didn't talk much.
It was fun to watch her reprimand him. We got a kick out of that.
Oh, really? Tell us about that. We'd like to hear that. I don't know any of these stories, so please.
But this was his mother, and of course we had, held him in, the highest regard, but mom, this was Ed, so she'd sit there and he'd reach over something and she'd smack his hand and goes, that's not polite, and just, it was just funny. She like Lee said, she didn't really talk a lot, but when it came to him, she was always, conversing with him and telling him to be polite and let everybody else have some food, please. So it was kind of, a new experience, and we got a kick out of watching, her, work on him when, that never happened, in our world.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Chuck, did you know his family? Did you know?
No, I never met any of his people at all. Tom Bleeker's got a great story about Ed Parker's mother, because they were at the Bonaventure Hotel where they had his tribute, and he said, somebody said, well, take mom downstairs, and there was the escalator. She says, I've never been on an escalator, and he thought, oh my God, he said, I had to pick her up to put her on the first time. She's shaking like a dog shitting like razor blades, and she's hanging on, going all the way down. And he thought, oh, when we get to the bottom, what am I going to do? She's not going to go to walk. What am I gonna? And he saw me killing Parker's mother. I'm in big trouble. And he said, he picked her up, put her on, and that was fun. He said, oh God, I was sweating like that poor guy. I could just say he was a lot younger than two. Today you could probably handle him. Then not so much.
Hey, did you get a chance to meet all Mr. Parker's family?
I had a chance to meet David. Of
Joe?
course, saw all the kids, but
Did you meet Joe?
I think I met Joe once, and of course, I met his mom. So yeah, I think that was the extent.
How about you, Dennis?
Well, I met David. David's a spitting image of him.
Oh yeah.
They brought him out to the internationals in '91, and when he walked in, he was a little bit bigger, you know, but oh my God, I mean, he was like a twin. And
Yeah.
it was, he'd walk in and everybody freaked out, like, you know, he came back from the grave.
Yeah.
And you know, so he walked around, and so that was my first meeting with David, and it was like just incredible. I mean, he talked like him, he sounded like him, he looked like he even had some of the facial expressions, the eyes. You know, I mean, he wasn't quite as commanding, you know, per se as Mr. Parker was, but it was amazing. You know, David was really amazing, and David had a lot of artistic talents as well. Not quite as much as Edmund Jr., but he was a pretty good artist himself.
Your lessons with Ed Parker in the beginning, Chuck. What did you take away from those lessons, and you incorporate them into what you teach today?
Mean and lean. The system when I started was very, very lean. We had the basics. He ran your ass to the ground with basics. And then he'd teach us one technique, maybe, and we work on it for a couple of weeks or a month, and then another. We had a handful of techniques, mostly the escape techniques were there, but we only had about a handful of actual punching techniques. And then we freestyle. And like I said, it was basics, and then some of it was very, we got the whole thing within a couple of years. And then we started working to perfect it. And he said something at that time that resonated with me. And when I did what I did with the system, I wanted to take it back to what it was. And what he said was, I'd rather have 10 techniques to fight with than 100 techniques to fight me. And I remembered that. And when I said to Vic, I said, first of all, Vic came at me and he said, we got to make videos. And I said, no, we don't have to make videos. This is 1988. And he said, no, we got to make videos. I said, Vic, you can't teach my video. Ed Parker and I tried to teach my 8mm films. It didn't work. You can't teach my video. He said, well, no, we got to teach my, and I said, finally, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you again. We're not going to do it. And then I remembered something. This is 1988. And we were getting ready to, I mean, you know, video was just coming in. Ed Parker and I had a video outfit even before that. We had a camera and a great big thing, a CB2000. It was in a walnut cabinet, a little 9-inch monitor picked up, and it was reel to reel, half-inch tape. And that was long before anybody had any of that kind of stuff. We were already dealing in that. But so, and I remember something that a kid said to me in class one night, just before the class. He says, hey, he's like, I got a story about Chuck Norris. You'll get a kick out of it. I said, well, he didn't realize Chuck and I were friends. And I have great respect for the man. And he said, well, he wanted some more rank from his instructors in Korea, so he sent him an 8mm film. What do you think about that? I said, I think it's great. He said, what? I said, why? Why not? I said, if his instructors tell him what they want to see, and he shows it to them, what's the difference if you're standing in front of them or if you send them a film? And you can't screw on with the 8mm. There's no such thing as trick photography. I mean, you get what you get, and that's it. And I said, yeah, fine. And all of a sudden I said to myself, wait a minute, you know, this is 1988. And even now, if a kid or a person wants to, they can find a video camera to link up with their home VCR. Even if they don't have one, they can borrow one. And if we show them what we want to see and they show it to us, and then we get back on their team and say, Paul, you got it almost right, but you're wiping your block this way, that goes out at 45. And we can stand to the side, we can show 45 from 90. And now when they bring it back, they're doing the 45. We say, wow, we're teaching. Now we're teaching. But I said to Vic, even at that time in 1988, the system had gotten so big. I said, we cannot possibly teach all this on video. We can't do it, nor would I want to even try. I wasn't even teaching all of it at the time. When and I had our school together, I wasn't teaching it all because I didn't think really that people could grasp all of that. I'm talking about the people that's going to be in it for a couple of years. Now, you, Dennis, all you guys, you're crazies. So am I. We're going to be there for the long haul. We're going to be there no matter what. But the point is, how about a guy that's only going to be there for a couple of years and wants to take something away with it? Now you throw all this information at him, and he's got so much in his head. Whatever happened to? I'd rather have 10 techniques to fight with than 100 to fight me. He gave him hundreds to fight him. So I cut the thing down. I said it came down to 55 techniques, and we analyzed for 2 years. We analyzed every technique in the red book. Most of them I just cut out and said, no, we're not teaching that. And those that we did, sometimes we had to revamp them. In fact, most of the time we had to revamp them because I found some things that just weren't logical. And if it's not logic, if logic starts interfering, or if not logic, if tradition starts interfering with logic, tradition's got to go. Like the short outward block in short form 1, that's absolutely waste. It's useless. And you talk to most of the starting to say, yeah, I know that, but I said, but what? You're still teaching it. So that's what we did. Anyhow, I took it back to when it was mean and lean. And people have asked, how come 55 techniques? I said, because 56 would have been too many and 54 wouldn't have been enough. I don't know, it just worked out there.
You know, it's interesting you said that today's technology, everybody has one of these.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, well,
Yeah,
I saw that coming, but I didn't know it was going to be this good.
honestly, on most of the stuff I send you and Dennis, and I've shared probably with Lee, I shot it on this phone.
Oh yeah.
I took a picture from my backyard on the balcony in the morning at sunrise. And I'm inspired to do that because of my daughter. She's totally my inspiration. And this phone is incredible what it does. And this is an S9, so it's a few years old. There's stuff that, you don't need all that. So it's there.
Oh my God. Everybody's got it now. And it is just so easy. I use my phone for everything. I had a very sophisticated camera and I quit using it because this is just so much easier.
Lee, Ed Parker was a pioneer, obviously, listening to Chuck, how he was innovative by using video and film to analyze his methods of teaching, playing it backwards, going and forward, and then maybe as a teaching. What other things was he a pioneer for?
He was ahead of the curve on structuring a curriculum with disguised repetition.
Explain yourself. Explain that to the listener here.
Disguised repetition was something that karate people discovered in the 90s. And they said, if we can do the same thing in a different way, we can get them to do what we want as far as motion goes. And Ed Parker knew that already. When he put everything on the list in 1970, he had already plugged that stuff into the curriculum. So you would see the same thing, only different. And he used to tell that story about Sam Ting. You remember that one?
Same thing. Yeah. The old Chinaman.
The old Chinaman. It goes to Ellis Island and Chinese. He's Chinese, but his name is Tim O'Reilly. And they said, well, how do you get to be called Tim O'Reilly? He says, well, he was behind somebody in the immigration line, and that man's name was Tim O'Reilly. So when I stepped up, they asked me what my name was. I said it was Sam Ting, so they call me Tim O'Reilly. And he used to illustrate that with the techniques. He said, this technique is the Sam Ting as this other technique. And if you realize that, you say, the one thing that he had said to me, which struck me, he said, most people are lazy and they're not going to practice the opposite side. They won't do the right and the left. And so he said the mechanics, most of the mechanics are left-handed to pick that up on the weak side. So that he used to say that thing about, well, if you get 3% better, that's still 3% more than you had. So breaking down all the stuff that he had in the big 154 curriculum, say, okay, there's a lot of disguised repetition in there. And I think that put him ahead of his time, along with the terminology. Yeah, it was John Corcoran, the editor at Inside Kung Fu, that really gave Ed Parker a lot of credit for being one of the first people I think John used to say he was the first person to come up with a glossary of terminology for martial arts that nobody else had done before. I'm sure there are people that tried, but Ed Parker did it extensively, and he did a pretty good job with it. And had he lived, it would have gotten even better.
Refined it even more. Yes, Dennis, your thoughts?
I agree. There's a lot of duplicity there, and it was a way to get the students to do the same thing, but think they were doing something different, And so, you have these techniques like the trio, Dance of Death, the Thundering Hammers, and the Sleeper. They all start with, and then we're block working to the outside, and there's more, but those three were kind of taught as a trio together, from low, middle, and high on the second strike, but the first strike was the same. So there's the mother father type thing. You start getting the term master key moves come in, master key basics come in. So they started, some of these things, that terminology started coming on later, but the numerous techniques, a lot of those were duplicity. So people were learning basically the same thing, but it was under a different name. And those that didn't look real carefully thought they were learning something entirely new, when really it was a way to get them to repetitiously drive home a point, which is exactly what Lee's saying. I'm just saying it a little bit different, but it's the same thing. And so I think it was clever in some ways, to be able to trick people into thinking they're learning something new. Not to mention, it also gave you something to teach and a business angle for which to, create a lesson plan for. And rather than do, a few techniques which some people would get very, bored with, even though it's the best thing. I know I am on this, have always been on this big basics thing, because it was drilled into me. I just created what I call a stance box. My guys now call it the IKKO torture chamber. And all it is a box with 2x4s in a square, and you sit inside it so that your feet cannot bow out anymore. That they maintain straightness. And then you can push down to get your stance lower. I so many times refer to Chuck Sullivan and Ed Parker doing the black belt set way back when, and if I say, look, study their stances. Look, they have good stances. They have kicks that retract. The kick just doesn't flash out like, say, a front kick and then dies and just drops down to the floor. They actually have retraction. They've got a recapturing of stance, a recapturing of stabilization of base, the coordination involved. So I love that video clip, because I say, look, it teaches basics, and everybody looks at Ed Parker in the 80s when he did the Infinite Insights, when he's got what I call a TP stance, which is vertically. I mean, you're never going to fight from a real wide stance. That's true, but that's why it's called a training horse, not a fighting stance. Your fighting stance is much, shorter because of maneuverability. But basics are like, and we've reiterated that, like Chuck said, and I'm sure Lee will agree as well. Basics, in foot maneuvers are key basics. You got to have those. Those are your cornerstones to build upon, and then you add all the others to it.
It's funny you say that, because we were talking about that earlier. If you watch and look at the early photographs in the Chinese karate book that he has, okay, from 63, I think it is. And I think you might be in them, maybe not, Chuck, I'm not sure. But if you look at those early photos of you guys, you'll notice that not only are your stances tight and whatnot, but you'll notice that the toes are turned in slightly. And people miss that. And I don't know why, because if you ever listen to the analysis on it, and I'm going to have Chuck explain it to us, why it's so essential, you wouldn't do it any other way. Am I right there, Chuck?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if your front foot isn't turned in, well, just stand, get along a stance sometime, put it out straight, and you'll just feel your leg there's no strength in it. Not nearly like there is when you turn your foot in. one day I was cutting this guy's hair, a Chinese guy, and we got into the art, and he was very, very knowledgeable on what he was doing. And so I said, I'd like to see a little more. So I said to the guys, I'm going to lunch. Well, we went up to the dojo instead. I had a key and I let us in. We went under the mats, and he's going to show me one of his forms. And he insisted that my foot stay straight. I couldn't do it. Every time I got a stance, my foot just automatically turned in. And finally, I realized that if that's what this form was, I was never going to be able to learn it, because I was never going to be able to stand with my front foot pointing straight ahead. And finally, I said to this guy, I said, do you freestyle? And he says, his English, put it this way, his English was a lot better than my Chinese, which is nil, but he had a tough time with English. And I thought, well, just, moving, fine, sparring. Oh, yeah. And I said, well, let's go. We had our shoes off, and we touched hands and started moving around. And I did something similar, just put a back fist right up. We didn't block it or anything. And I mean, it came within a whisper of his nose. And he's bucked back and he says, you hit me. I looked at my hands, like, no, oh my God, no, I didn't. And he said, you could hit me. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's no problem there. But that was amazing to me. He talked a great fight, but when it came right down to it, I don't know what the hell he studied really, because it was wow. It was nothing there. That form was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny
Just
you're talking about that back in the early days in the training. I'll never forget Parker talking about basics and whatnot. And I shared with you a story from '82 when I was teaching in Pasadena, and he came in and he was, doing his business on the phone, which he would do in the evening, and he'd be watching us all. And he came in to take over my class. Why don't you tell us about the secrets of Kenpo karate? Chuck, tell us the story.
Well, I think
20 years earlier.
this is really early. I think Dave Himmel was in the class. I think Danny and Asano. We're all in white geese, of course, and we were doing a lot of basics. I mean, a lot of basics, and we're blocking, kicking, punching, basics, and now we're working in partners, and I got I'm facing him, and I see him walk to the back, and I'm kind of watching him while I'm working with this guy. I thought I saw him lock the door. Well, that's okay. Maybe people have been coming in or whatever. Then I saw him walk to the front, and I thought I saw him lock the door. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. Now we're locked in, or are they locked out? I'm not sure which. So then he comes and he says, all right, you guys, listen. Take it easy for a minute. So now we're standing in a puddle of our own sweat. Our geese are clinging to us, and we're happy to have a break. Oh, he's going to talk for a while. Good. Now we can breathe. He says, I hear what you're saying. I know what you're talking about. You're wondering when I'm going to teach you the secrets. And I had heard that. When's he going to teach us the secrets? When are we going to learn the secrets? And I thought to myself at that time, what secrets? What are you talking about, secrets? Oh, no, there's secrets. Really? And then he said, tonight, I want to teach you the secrets. And I thought to myself, wow, there really are secrets. I'll be damned. I didn't think, wow, now I'm like, oh, God, tell a secret. He says, you want the secrets? You know what we've been doing for the last hour? Those are the secrets, the basics. And you've had them all along. Right up.
When I shared my story with you 20 years after when you shared it, he got up and he ran the class for about 20, 25. He was in his glory then, he wasn't McGee. And at the end, these people are thinking they're going to get impart this wisdom, this great knowledge and whatnot. And then he said exactly what you said to them. And I knew something was up, and he was just working them. And he's right. I know Lee will probably agree with me on that. He's right. If you don't have solid foundation, stances, foot maneuvers, and et cetera going down, you're going to get something handed to you. Am I right there, Lee?
Absolutely. I used to call them the ABCs. Those are your ABCs. It's your foundation. You've got to have them. And it's beyond me when I see people, I've visited a lot of schools in my career. It's like, they tell me we don't teach the basics. And I ask them why. They say, well, they're in the techniques.
Oh, oh, yeah, they are. But oh my God. Oh, gee. That's what I found really was the problem with Krav Maga. They didn't teach basics. They just taught tricks.
Right.
Yeah, they're all there, but how many people are gonna know to find it? No. You gotta get you learn to write by I learned to read and write by studying your ABCs. If you don't know your alphabet, you're screwed. So
Tell us about the alphabet of motion then.
Well, that's it. And it's the alphabet of motion, right? ABC, and then they start building them in simple words that become more complex words. Before you know it, you're an encyclopedia, but not before you know it. It takes a long, long time, but those basics are just there. And yes, you're right, Dennis. We did have stances back in the 60s. We really did. Everybody did, and we all worked very low. The theory to me was if you work low, you can always get low. You can just be there. If you don't and you need it, it's not going to be there. You're not going to be able to get there. Your stability is going to be gone. Low stands for stability, high stands for mobility. So you got to have something in between when you're fighting. And we've got it. We've got them low. We've got them high. We've got them all.
I like it when Dennis we've had that discussion, Dennis, you and I, about the alphabet and the use of words that were created from the 26 letters. Go ahead. Talked about that.
Well, I think I used in one of our discussions, the way I view them is, the basics, are in like our language, there's 26 letters to the alphabet. And when is the last time those letters were changed? And in any of our lifetimes, never is the word. It goes back, centuries. But however, the definitions or new words can evolve from those 26, but nevertheless, the 26 are the foundation, and if you don't have those 26, you're in trouble. Oftentimes you don't use X or Z, but when you need it, it's there, even though it may be of minimal use compared to, your vowels, A, E, I, O, U. And so I think Lee made a comment when I made that, when we had this discussion, before on that analogy, and I think it holds true. People need to learn the alphabet, and that's the basis for our system, is to learn the alphabet, and the alphabet basically is our basics.
Thoughts there? Any thoughts there, Lee?
It's a good construct. I was teaching over in Sweden years ago, and I remember saying, well, there's 26 letters, and they went, oh no, because they have 29 in their alphabet.
Hawaii's only got 17.
Okay. But the idea is still, it's right. The same. Musical structure changes from culture to culture, continent to continent. It's a good construct, works for us, gets the idea across, and you've got to have something that's relatable. It's one of the elements of communication, is that you have to have a common language to get the idea across here. A psychology professor that I had taken a seminar with, I had a police instructor seminar years ago, used to say, well, some things are splix with reebs, and you look and go, splix with reebs, what? And you don't understand it because you don't have a commonality. There's no definition there. So Ed Parker said, let's Americanize this. Let's use English instead of Chinese terminology. You still get mental images, but in a different way. Instead of white crane spreads its wings, he uses clutching feathers. He's like, okay, feathers, that's hair. I get it. So the cultural differeces, and of course the things that he said, we wear shoes, we don't work in rice paddies. And so the art had to be Americanized, and it worked. It works great for us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you wear shoes, Lee, when you work out?
I do.
I agree.
We did it ever since I broke my toes. And that was back in the 60s. I told people, come on, I wear shoes the rest of my life. And what am I going to do? Kick them off when I want to fight? No. And no. If you don't wear them, and that's all you do in your fighting, and that's what you're used to, bare feet, you're gonna feel funny when you got your shoes on. You're not going to want them on. You're going to want to be in a natural state. which is ridiculous. No, I introduced shoes. I had shoes introduced into the second international championships.
Yeah.
I was the tournament director that year, and I said, "We're gonna let them wear shoes." And they went, "Oh no! Oh my God! Are you serious? Holy! I mean, you never heard such bitching in your life." And then finally they walked. They said, "Let's talk to Mr. Yamashita and Mr. Yamamoto." Two of these. Their geese were so brilliant you could hardly look at. I mean, they were so white, it was beyond white, and you had to kind of anyhow. They came up to these guys, and I thought, well, this is it. I mean, what do you mean? Let's talk to these guys. First of all, what have these guys got to do with anything? And anyhow, I thought, well, I was getting so much opposition, and I thought, well, I've lost this fight. So we walked up to these guys, and maybe they just didn't understand it. I don't know. But all of a sudden, the one looks at the other, looks at the guy talking, and says, "Good idea." So we had shoes in the international. It took 20 more years before they reintroduced them, but I had it in the second international. That's a true story.
So what was Mr. Parker's greatest innovative pioneer breakthrough for martial arts, Chuck?
He was in the right place at the right time, Paul. Basically, he got in with the entertainment industry, and therefore he was able to get it and in there. And he was already doing technical advising and things of that sort, and it was its time. And like he said, I would have slowed it. He couldn't. There was no way. I think he described it one time as 20 trains taking him off in different directions in the middle of the night, and I've been trying to catch him ever since. It just got away from him. It got too big, too fast.
I'm sitting here listening to you three gentlemen, and I have learned a lot about Ed Parker through your responses. Lee, your responses. I feel like I'm listening to Ed Parker. When I listen to Dennis, I'm hearing the philosophical, intellectual side of certain things that appeal to him. When I listen to Chuck, I'm seeing blood fly. I'm seeing teeth being knocked out. I actually see. So you three gentlemen, I'm actually having a lesson with Ed Parker through you. And that is a testimony to the impact and the influence he had on you. And it's incredible that we can talk about it this way. We started off in a somber mood, and now it's very jovial. Because really, when you get down to it, Mr. Parker was fun. Kenpo's fun. It really is. We've over 200 videos in the Kenpo Hall of Fame so far. We get over 10,000 people watching this every month. And it's because of people like you, Lee Wedlake, and Dennis Conatser, and Chuck Sullivan. They'll never have the chance maybe to meet you, but they can watch you. And I hope that 5 years, 10 years from now, that these videos will keep on educating people on where we came from and what we're about. And this tonight was really actually an insight in a little more of a background rather than just theoretical, but we covered it again. And when you look at all of the martial arts that we see today, it is so ironic when I look at how many principles and concepts they take from Ed Parker. It is amazing that you see that when Chuck talks about choice of targets and the weapon we're going to use, or Lee talks about the proper stances and foot maneuvers, or Dennis will come in with, the variations, the variable expansion. We'll talk about, these guys are sharing this, but they're selling it as snake oil, but they really don't know how it was made. And I think that's a big injustice to the young martial artist and the person that's out there thinking, I'll walk in there, I'm going to learn some tricks, and I'm going to be okay. And today, that's a very, very dangerous proposition, Mr. Sullivan. Am I right?
Yeah.
We live in very turbulent times right now, gentlemen. Very scary. I never thought I would see this. And I fear for my son. And I fear for you too. Because you guys are very proficient. But you know what? It's not going to be your proficiency. It's going to be your awareness of understanding what Ed Parker taught you in his private lessons with you, Lee, or in all those discussions that he had with you, Dennis, on the road, and the lesson of not telling the customs people we have drugs inside the video cameras. That ain't gonna happen again, I guarantee you. You know, and Chuck was right there when the foundation was being built. When it was really, and he understands that, and that's the real deal. You go over to his place and he has his dummies, and you kick that thing full on in the groin with a full front snap kick, and I guarantee you, it's sort of redeeming, Chuck. It was. I said, "Oh my God, I can really hit this sucker."
Oh, you can hit him all day long, and he never cries, never bitches, never moans.
Just remember that when my son comes to visit you.
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
I'll put him at my side.
Yeah,
In fact, behind me,
we're gonna
unless he reaches under.
we've been going for some time, and it's been truly enjoyable. This is one of the fun ones for me. I got to spend quality time with three men that I truly admire, that have contributed so much to the Kenpo.
Got to leave you. But I know we're winding it up. I got to leave you one story that I thought was the greatest story I ever heard Ed Parker tell. He was over in Hawaii with Elvis when Elvis was doing the Hawaii show, and it's just the two of them driving around in his Cadillac convertible. And Elvis is trying to pronounce only 17 letters in the Hawaiian language, so there's a lot of E's and I's, and you know, and he's having the hell of it. He's trying to pronounce all the names that he's seeing on the roadside, and Ed is correcting him on every one. Is it? Oh, Mr. Parker, I think this is Nakahuta. No, Elvis says, and finally Elvis sitting there now. He's afraid to even open his mouth, and he sees what he says. Oh, I got this with Pimolini. And then Parker says, "That's pipeline."
Oh, that's a good one. Well, you know, I'm gonna conclude it. And Lee, what's your final thoughts?
Well, boy, I got a lot of them, but there's one thing I'd like to say is that I don't get to see and talk to Chuck Sullivan nearly enough. And that book that you just held up has been long out of print, but I'm glad I put it out there. But I don't get to see Mr. Sullivan nearly enough. The last time we had face-to-face encounter was at Bob White's thing in Costa Mesa. And I just got a few minutes to talk with you, Chuck. You were gracious. And the cool thing about it was that everybody that saw the two of us talking stepped back and let us have our space and time. It was just
Couple old farts having a good time, Lee.
It was nice. You took the time with me to answer a couple of questions, and everybody else said, let's just leave them alone, because you know how it is. They just, so that was great. I really, really appreciate that from you.
Dennis,
I appreciate all you guys whenever I get to see you. It's such a pleasure, such a joy.
well, then we're going to have to continue to do this, because honestly, gentlemen, I think it's really exciting to hear what the three of you have to offer, because you've had different perspectives of it. Dennis, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I share it. It's great to, I haven't seen Mr. Sullivan in a long, long time. And I look forward to one of these days going over to dinner with Chuck. I think that would be
Anytime, Dennis,
great.
whenever you're here, anytime. We'll make a dinner with Chuck.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
Lee, of
anytime.
course, I can't wait now to be with my new hero, the Texas Alamo Ranger. And so, you know, I gotta get that. I do have a signed book of in fact, all of them that Lee put out. So he was gracious enough to sign all the books for me. So they're all very good books. Anybody that has a chance to get them, I would say, unequivocally, you know, get them, read them. There's a lot of nuggets of insight and knowledge in those. And so I think they're very good reads.
Thank you.
Lee, the same thing, same offer, Lee. Whenever you're in town, let me know. And if you're here on a Monday night, we'll set up a dinner with Chuck. Let everybody know, maybe a day or two ahead of time. And it's just a good time. Now we can't eat and talk, so we have dinner first, then we have dinner with Chuck.
You know, it's funny you guys
Dessert with
talking
Chuck.
like that. Lee was gracious enough to send this to me, and this will be passed on with all the other wonderful treatises I have. It will go right there alongside Ed Parker's writings. And that means a lot to me, Lee. Anyway, I want to conclude with something, gentlemen. For a long time, I had my daughter was my inspiration for many of the things I have done. 2 years ago, she passed away. She was a child of special needs, but she taught me the importance of life. And recently I came across a quote that was written by a gentleman by the name of Paul Boyles, from 1949, The Sheltering Sky. I'm not going to read the entire quote, but I thought this was interesting. He said, because we do not know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well, and yet everything happens only a certain number of times. Everything happens only a certain number of times. Jobina taught me there is no perfect thing, person, or life, but there are perfect moments. So today, I think we have made a perfect moment, and I've shared that with you, gentlemen. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate your friendship more than anything else, and it's truly an honor to have this time with you. Thank you, Lee Wedlake. God bless you for coming on. Mr.
Appreciate
Dennis
it.
Conatser, always great to have a conversation with you. And my dad, Chuck Sullivan, I love you very much. You're the best.
We love you, Paul.
All right.
You guys were wonderful. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
I did
On
too.
behalf of the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame, thank you, gentlemen. God bless you and good night.